So good afternoon, everybody in the room and out on the web. Thank you for coming to see us for our 2018 training for our grants management system. I'm Will Sumner. I'm the Stewardship Director and General MC for this, as well as filling in for Gwyn McCullough, who is the normal GMS guru, who is not feeling well today. So I'll cover it as best I can, and anything we can't get taken care of, we'll reach out to Gwyn later and get her dealt with. All right. Just 1 second. There, that's better. Everybody appropriately muted. All right.
Turn the entry and exit chimes off.
Is that an option?
Yep, I got it.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the GMS, talk a little bit about our timeline for this grant cycle, then we'll get into how you register with GMS, getting access, signing in and navigating, and then we'll do a kind of a live demo of a dummy application so you can see what it looks like as you go screen by screen, and then we'll leave a little time for some Q&A about that part. Then we'll hand it over to Nancy, and she'll do a brief update on the acquisition program, take some questions and answers about that, and then Steve will do the same for Restoration Innovative Stormwater. And that'll be the end of kind of the formal part for all the folks that are would-be grant applicants. At the end, Terry's got a few slides dedicated to folks that may already have another grant that they're administering and want a little bit of help and tips on administering a grant that you have already gotten, or if you're feeling very lucky that you anticipate getting next year. And with that, I will get into it. So we'll take questions at the end of each section of presentations. For you folks in the room, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. For all you folks out there on the web, I've got all your phones muted, and there's so many of you. I think it's going to be best if you just use the chat window, and Justin will be monitoring the chat questions, and at the end of each section, he'll read them out on your behalf, and I will answer them. Right, so what is GMS? This is our grants management system. We're in the second year of using it. This was created by the Department of Transportation. They've used it for a lot of other agencies managing both state and federal grants. It's auditable, so every entry and change is logged in the system, and it's integrated with the state's payment system, which is the most important part. If you actually get a grant, then the payment goes a lot smoother and a lot more efficiently. So we'll get into this a little bit later, but I want to go ahead and kind of put this on your radar so you're anticipating it later. While you're logged into the online grants management system, the only thing you'll actually fill out is really essentially the budget and maybe one or two other tables. The bulk of what you would consider the application is a separate fillable PDF that you'll download, fill out, pass around your office for review, and then upload at the end of the process. So the bulk of the actual work of the application is done outside the system, but all the part that involves the dollars and cents is done in the system, so it can later be integrated into payments and budgets and contract process. So the timeline for this year, as you all know, the grant cycle went live December 1st. Because of the processes that I'll explain to you, or Terry will explain to you in a few minutes, there's a few steps to getting into the GMS if you haven't gotten a grant with us before. And it requires one or two steps to go outside of our office, and that's why we can't guarantee the speed of that. So the deadline is February 5th. However, if you were starting from scratch and do not have access to GMS, the last date I would say you should start is January 22nd. So that gives a couple weeks to get into the system and get that part done. Now, I wouldn't wait until that happens. I'd go ahead and get in the system soon, and then you don't have to worry about that. But don't think that you can show up on the 5th or the 4th and have any hope of actually completing an application if you haven't gotten that one critical part of being enrolled in the GMS out of the way. Once February 5th happens, close the business that day, the application will close, and then March through June will be application review for both central office staff as well as field reps, and then the board meeting to review the applications and make awards will be September 12th. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Terry to talk a little bit about getting access to the GMS and the various forms that you need to get completed if you are new to it.
I might just do this. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Terry Murray. I'm with the restoration side of the house and the other backup administrator for GMS. So what Will was talking about is for those of you that may or may not be in the system, hopefully everybody is by now, but we've had a few new ones. You've got to be in the North Carolina State Accounting System before we can actually grant you access into GMS, and that's the part that we're talking about on this slide. This is the information we're going to need about your organization, and it has to be exact, and I've got to have all of those pieces of information. The only one that's voluntary is the electronic funds transfer form, and that's because that's an option up to you, your organization. If you choose to get your funds that way, I can tell you it's much quicker than waiting for a paper check, and we would prefer you go that way. So hopefully that makes sense. Does anybody have any questions? Well, we'll wait on the questions, but so we need these pieces of paper filled out. You send them to me. We get you into the INCAS, then we get you into GMS, and then here's what the W-9 looks like. We have these, we can forward to you. Then here's what the EFT form now looks like, and we send that to you.
Which is the electronic funds transfer.
Yep, the electronic funds transfer form. And then here's the next part of it. So once we've gotten you in, then we're going to need you to get into our GMS. This is a fillable PDF form that we send out with you. I will typically send it out with you at the same time that I'm sending out the other forms so that we can get everything back together. This is each person, up to 3 in your organization, have to complete this form, and it's really important that you make a note. There is an 8-digit number that you have to create yourself, and that is your unique identifier, and you need to keep up with it. We do have it on file under password protection for your safety, but they will not help you at all in GMS if you have lost that number. So that's really important that you make it a number you can keep up with.
The 8-digit code is for each of the 3 users, or is one for the organization?
Each user has to have their own unique ID.
And that's the primary use for that is you get locked out of the system or forget your password or fail too many times and then attempt to get logged in. You can call up a number and you can use that PIN to let them know it's really you and it's okay to change the password.
Yeah, because most of the things you're going to need in GMS will ask you to call us first, because 90% of the time we can handle it for you. The one thing that we can't is if you lock yourself out. That's the one thing that we're going to force you back to DOT for assistance with.
These are carried over from previous years?
Yes, if you're already in, you don't have to change anything. The only thing is if you haven't logged in within 3 months, you're probably going to need to reset your password and you may have to get reestablished. You'll still have everything the same, but we'll have to reactivate you. So that's why we're saying don't wait, because it does, like Will said, we have to rely on somebody else. So if it was up to us, we'd do it as soon as you call, but we have to rely on somebody else to work us into their schedule, and we're not the only grants program that they deal with. So does anybody have any other questions? What happens too after this is approved, I may be skipping ahead a little bit. Once you're in GMS, you get a welcome email that then tells you to go in and change your password. That's how you'll know you're in, and then you can start with the next section, which is here.
All right. Thank you, Darren. All right. So what I'm going to do is kind of walk you through with some slides and screenshots, and then after that, I'll actually go out on the web and fill out a dummy application. So just get the broad strokes of it here. Pay attention to the things, the notes that I'll emphasize, but you don't have to scratch all this down. In fact, there's another guidance document that is about 8 to 9 pages with plenty of screenshots that walks you through the same sort of thing I'm about to walk you through. It's just good for you to have kind of seen it once before we go through it. So once you've done all the things that Terry and I have discussed, that you have your GMS username and password, you log on to that screen, and that brings up this little blue screen in the lower left corner. There's a couple tiles there. The only one you need to worry about is the one that says DNCR grants. DNCR because that's our agency, Department of National and Cultural Resources. And that brings up the GMS home screen. Now, once you're on that home screen, it's got a bunch of stuff that eventually, if you're successful in getting a grant, you'll learn about all the buttons and all the various links, but in this phase of it, you just need to worry about the top 4 sections: application forms, create new application, edit an existing, and view application attachments. So those are the ones I'll talk about right now. So on the first link, application forms, that'll bring up a PDF that looks something like this. It's got a few critical points, one of which I will say often and early. Contact your field representative. That's Justin Mercer down east and Damon Hearn out west. Their contact is prominent on our website. Reach out to them, ask questions about your project, and ask them pretty much any questions aside from technical GMS questions, and they're a resource for you. So once you get to this page, depending on what program you're interested in, acquisition, restoration, innovative stormwater planning, you can download the actual application and the guidance docs and the criteria. And that application is the aforementioned fillable PDF that you can shop around your, send around your shop and fill out, save, and eventually gets uploaded back. This pops up as a PDF. For some reason, it comes in with no back window, so the best thing to do is just save it as a copy on your desktop, then you'll have it. You don't have to keep going in here to get it. Next link down is create a new application. This is where the nuanced GMS is a little interesting. The thing this calls an application is really what you would recognize as simply a budget. But the budget is kind of the placeholder in the way that you upload information into the system. So when you create a new application, you basically don't have to do anything. This system, because it's a big statewide system, it assumes that you might be eligible for any of the numerous types of grant applications that are out in the DOT system. Chances are, right now, it's just going to be ours. So if you just hit search with nothing in the window, it'll pull up these 2018 Clean Water Grant Applications types, and you can click on it and start an application of your choice. And this is what comes up. Again, it's essentially just the application portion of the budget. Any field that is in the light gray blue is a field that you can complete. Anything with a red asterisk is mandatory. There's a couple of blue question marks throughout that reveal a tooltip. If you hover over them or click over them, they'll give you extra information. But this is the really the only thing that you will do from within the GMS system. And I'll go into this in some detail when we get to an actual live application. So when you get to the end of that budget form, you can hit the check button, which will just look for errors, and it'll either tell you you've got an error and highlight it, or it'll tell you you're okay. The next thing to do is save, and after that, you can hit submit. Now, I wouldn't. Nobody has to be a hero here. Save it, come back to it. Once you submit it, you can't unsubmit it without our help, and unless it happens to be February 5th, sleep on it, upload your attachments, come back to it. I would not advise hitting submit on the first run through. That's just save it. You can come back to it. So if you choose to save, it's just going to tell you that you'll have to recheck the little checkbox at the end, and you can, when you come back to it to finally submit it, you can hit yes. Then you have an option to go ahead and upload your attachments, or you can go back to home. Here's what to do if you want to submit the application. It's pretty straightforward. Again, it's just yes. It's a non-reversible process, so wait until the very, very end and come back and submit it. I wouldn't do that on your first run through. If you do upload attachments either through the save or submit process, you'll basically, it's a pretty typical browse window that you've seen. There is a place to put a description for each document. In the guidance documents, there are conventions, naming conventions for all the files. 2018 Clean Water Application is not very helpful to us. Many of you will name them that way, so it's helpful if you have a project name and then underscore and then application, project name underscore map, project name underscore GIS files, etc. There's specific guidance on that in the guidance doc, and we'll come through this in detail when we do the live demo. So the third button down, you've got the application where you get your application forms, your create application where you start a new one, and then edit existing. So you've already done one, you've hit save, you've walked away, you want to come back, you can hit the edit existing application where you can go back into one And if you have more than one open, you can choose the one that you want to work on, open it up, make any changes. Again, you can save it and walk away from it, or you could submit it at that point, depending on where you are. And the fourth of those links is the View Application and Attachments. So this allows you not only to view your application, but not edit it. It allows you to also see all the attachments that you have, as well as the status. And this works, if you haven't submitted it, you can view it. Once you've submitted it, you can still view it. So this is useful, but again, you can't edit in this view, but you can see your attachments, and you can also attach here. I'll talk a little more about that when we're doing the live demo. And we'll cover this in a bit more in a moment. So before we jump into GMS, I'm just going to show you how to get to some of these things on our website. So if you Google CWMTF, you will come up top result. This is our home page right now. There's a little green bar that takes you right into the grant cycle area if you want to get there the long way. Grants, pretty intuitive. 2 areas under grant: apply for a grant or manage an existing grant. Well, if you want to apply for a grant, you're going to go here. And we've got a little bit of basic information, and on the right-hand side, there's navigation for each of our 5 grant programs. So let's choose land acquisition as an example. Apply for a land acquisition grant. It'll tell you a little bit about project eligibility, talk a little bit about the grant application process, and then there's another link to access GMS. It's one deeper. This gives you 3 kind of common steps, and then buried in there is the actual link to get into GMS. I know we've made it a little hard to get to. There's just a lot of information we kind of want to force people through before they actually get there, because if we put it on the home page, they jump right in and may be a little lost. But this is how you can get to it. It's also in several of the help docs, and once you've been there once, I highly recommend that you bookmark it. Now, there is one really important thing. Please pay attention to this. If you open this in Firefox or Chrome or any other browser other than Explorer or Microsoft Edge, one of the features won't work. Now, I detest Explorer, but I have it on my computer just for this one thing. So you've got to remember that. It'll look like it's going well. You'll get on into the system, but when you go to open your table, the little wheel will just spin, and you'll never actually see the budget. So if you get to that point, make sure you've opened it in either Explorer or the newer Microsoft Edge that's on a lot of computers. So I'm going to open up a Microsoft Explorer. Log on. Again, the big tile, DNCR grants. All right. For some reason, it always starts me in the middle where I can't see my left navigation window. But these are the 4 links that we were talking about. Because I'm in a sandbox, which is a test version of the real one, this link doesn't work, but I'll show you what it would give me. It would give me the application, app forms and guidance links. So here's the document that you would get if you click that inside the real system. There's this link to get in touch with your field rep. There's some helpful information. This link goes to a quick start document, which is essentially a screenshot and step-by-step version of what I'm telling you today. It reads like stereo instructions, but it's very clear and linear. If you follow it, it should be able to get you where you need to go. But here's where you can get access to the application, as well as the guidance and criteria documents. And while I'm here, let's go ahead and grab it, take a look at it. This is what a typical application looks like. Fillable fields, pull downs. You can save it as your own document on the computer and then send it around to folks so you can save your work. And the criteria actually takes you back to the home page where there's the grant evaluation criteria. This is where the 100 points that we score come from. Folks will be interested in that. And this other one is the application questions and guidelines. Not to be confused with the actual application itself, but these guidelines kind of walk you through all the things that you need to get your application. Talks a little bit about some basic information, what's new, this is important, but Nancy and Steve will get to that. And then it's just a list of all the questions, so you can kind of be reviewing those and getting ready for those outside the system, as well as we ask you for surface water classifications. The guidance document has links to all these map viewers where you can get that information. So the guidance doc is going to be a sprint in getting these things completed. And it has, at the end of it, there's some examples of the map standards that we'd like you to adhere to when you attach maps, as well as a sample of the empty budget form that you will find inside the GMS. So with this one document, you can do a lot of homework in preparing to submit your grant. So having said all that, let's go back and jump inside here. That's what you'll find behind the first link. Now we're going to create a new application. I'm sorry that I can't have this just pop up with clean water grants. It's part of a giant system and they can't customize it to that level for us. But all you have to do here is just hit search. The idea is if there was 1,000 types of grants you could apply for in the state system, you would actually need to search it. Most of you are going to find 5 clean water grants that pop up. So we've got acquisition, innovative stormwater. Well, this is a sandbox, so this is not exactly what you'll see, but it's more or less you'll see the 4 types. So we'll jump into the acquisition version. And now I have created a new application. Give it a project title. I'll call it the Summer, let's try again. Summer Tract, Dry Creek. Project expiration. This is important. The max for a contract for us is 36 months. Don't be a hero here either. We're not going to be impressed if you put 8 months and then we have to go and do a contract extension. So pick what you think is a reasonable time, double it and add 6 and put that number here. So I'm going to say 24 months. Go through, I'll pick a county. Again, the gray fields are the ones you can fill out. We'll do 10,000. Well, this is a modest ask, isn't it? 10,000. Some of these white fields, like the transaction costs and the stewardship endowment, you're not actually able to fill out here because there's a table below where you'll actually fill out the transaction costs. So you can fill out the transaction costs here. I'll just make it simple. You're matching. So the source of the matching, we'll say these are REPI funds, and I'll choose the source. It's going to be federal. The funds are applied toward. This is what aspect of the grant. So in acquisition, there's generally transaction costs, so there's land acquisition. So I'm just going to say land acquisition. The obligatory. There we go. And just to make an example of it, I'm going to only say 90,000. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. There we go. Choose. Yeah, sure. They're committed. We got those funds. It's going to have stewardship. You'll need to enter in. This is a estimate of your annual cost of stewardship monitoring. The way our stewardship program works is that we hold the endowment and you invoice us each year for your stewardship costs. I'm going to spend 2 hours in the office doing my pre-visit, 8 hours on site. It's a big tract. 3 hours filling out the report, making maps, etc. Scroll on down. Travel cost. It's 100 miles round trip. Federal rate is 53.5. Entering 54. Always spend $15 on boundary signs, etc. So that calculates an annual expense and then multiplies it to an endowment amount and then populates it back up here. So there's a transaction cost, there's a stewardship cost, and the restoration program, Innovative Stormwater, have similar tables. They don't have stewardship tables, but they've got property owner tables and other tables that would be filled out. But that is pretty much, let's say it's 100 acres. That's pretty much what you would have to fill out in the online part of GMS. So we'll hit check. It's going to give me an error. The total matching funding must be equal. So up here, I said that there was $10,000 in matching funds, but down here, I said 90,000. So obviously I've made an error here. I'll just fix it. We'll make that one 90. Run a check. Check completed. Great. I'm going to hit save. Not submit. No run. You can, but don't. I'm going to hit save. And what it's telling me is that I'll have to go back in and check this and re-sign it. If I did it now, I'd just erase it. Click yes. All right. So I've saved it. I can either go back, get back up top here. I can either go back home, and this is always sitting over there. If you click this, you always go back to where those first 4 links are at any point throughout it. If I wanted to upload attachments, I could do it here. I'll choose to. Typical browse. I've got my stuff all neatly sitting over here to upload. There's the application, which is the actual 14-page form that you've downloaded. I'll hit select. It's going to throw it on a table. I'll do application. And let's put our location map. We can put our property map. And how about a zipped shapefile for the GIS for all the acquisition folks? All right, so I'll just put a little description there, GIS, property map, location map. Not done yet. Attach selected files. Boom. All right. Having done that, I'm going to go back home, not having submitted it, and I will just go so I can edit the existing application, which just brings me kind of back to that same screen. This would be the way I would want to upload it. Now, this is going to show all the grants that I have open. If this is your first one, there'll only be one. If you've got a bunch, some agencies will have multiple. You can select which one. This was me, Summer Track, Dry Creek. Click the link. And there we are again. Everything is there. I could submit it, but I'm not going to. Save, yes, all right. Go back home and check out the fourth of the 4 buttons that are of interest to you guys. View application and attachments. Same sort of process. If you really had a whole bunch of these things, you could remember the last couple of your application ID, which would be, this one's 5781, so I could do star 57881, and it would only bring up this one, but I don't think you guys have got that many going on that you need to worry about that. So there it is again. Now in this view, it's a little bit different. I can't edit anything. This is just for me to take a look at the version of the application, but I can see that my attachments are there. So I can verify that. It makes me feel good because they all the little window disappears once you get them attached. So you can come back here and check it out. Go back. It's also hiding on the right-hand side. There's a back button as well. So one other thing you can see both from the results list when you're doing the, let me get rid of that and just do a search with many results. So you can see the user status. Now this is the one I just did. Summer Track, Dry Creek. It's in process by applicant. That's me. So I haven't submitted it. Had I submitted it, I could see that it looked like this. So let's assume I'm going to go ahead and go back home. I'm going to submit it. We'll change that just so we all know how to make ourselves feel satisfied that this system has it submitted and that we're not wondering whether or not we've done everything and our application is going to be received. So we'll search. Go down here. All right, I'm going to check the box, enter my name, maybe a little more. Get the date, submit. Are you sure? Now once you hit submit, it is possible to get it back. You just have to reach out to somebody on staff and get them to reject it, or return it rather, and then you can have it done again. But if they're not at their desk, then you're kind of in trouble there. So just wait. Wait till the end. All right. I'm going to submit it. I've already uploaded all my attachments. There's no need to do it. When I click here, it's not going to show me that they're already uploaded, but I know that because I've been paying attention. And actually, uploading is the one thing you can do after you hit submit. So there is, it's not a, that part is not lost. So let's take a look and see that I can feel good about my application. All right, there it is, Summer Track, Dry Creek. It has been submitted. If I want to see what was submitted, I just click here. Double check that everything is as I have remembered it. Close that. There we go.
When it does that, hit F5 to refresh.
Okay, thank you, Tara.
Actually, there's a refresh button up above application.
Is there?
Take you out.
There.
Will, your audio is not recording.
Not recording anymore?
Yeah, you just got a message.
Interesting. All right. Give me just 1 second. Says it's being recorded. All right. Well, we'll address that later if we can. So anyhow, here I am. There's the application details. There's all my attachments. So now I know what it is that Clean Water folks are seeing when I hit submit. Close that and go back here. All right, so before we bring up Nancy and Steve to kind of talk a little bit about some of the changes in the 2018 for acquisition, restoration, integrated stormwater planning, wanted to take a moment to have any Q&A about everything up to this point. And I'll start with folks in the room, and then if anybody has anything out loud, if they will send Justin or the organizer a chat, he'll read them out. So any questions from the folks here? All right. Justin, anybody chatting in?
Yeah, so first one, will a copy of your slides be available after we finish here?
Yes, we're actually going to make a copy of this recording if, in fact, it didn't have any technical difficulties, available on the website probably within a day or two, as well as the that quick reference document that I talked about, and I'll open it up here in a minute, is a pretty good step-by-step as well. It might even be better than the slides. So let me open that up. This is the document right here. So there's a checklist. It's got screenshots with big red arrows and numbers, and plenty of instructions. Again, it's more like stereo instructions. It's very specific, very linear, but if you follow it, it will get you to the finish line without any issues. All right, anything else?
Can you delete attachments once they're uploaded?
No, thank you for asking that. This is one of the glitches which we cannot, DOT in their system cannot do that. So do be pretty careful about your uploaded attachments. Inevitably, incorrect attachments will be uploaded, and the administrators, I believe, that would be Terry Murray and Gwyn McCullough, who's not here today, can delete them on your behalf, but again, send them around your folks for review first. Make sure it's exactly what you want. And I'm all for getting things done early, but as far as getting the documents uploaded to GMS, wait until kind of the end of the cycle, because that's a pretty common issue. So thank you for asking that. No, you can't, unfortunately. That is the one really counterintuitive part of it. Anything else, Justin?
No, but one related thing. Damon's pointing out that you can rename attachments to delete me or something.
Excellent.
Similar, so that it's clear which one applicants intend for us to use.
Good. Well, that is very helpful. So I guess aside from naming the new one, this is the real one. Rename the old one, delete me, or a bad one, or not good. That's great.
No more questions right now.
All right. Anything else from out in the room? All right. Well, I believe we will bring Nancy up, talk a little bit about the acquisition program. So the big arrows will change lines for you.
Okay, thanks. Can folks in the back of the room hear me? Okay, great. So for anyone out on the phone or in the room that I've not met, I'm Nancy Guthrie. I manage the acquisition side of Clean Water. And this year, there have not been a lot of changes to the acquisition criteria or the program in general. So just a very brief update on one of the changes. One change that we did make concerns what has always been called property management cost, but this has only been available to local governments in the past. And we met with our trustees over the last few months, and we decided that property management, this area needed a little bit better definition, and then we also want to expand this and open up the eligibility to nonprofit organizations, keep all local governments eligible, and then state agencies without a dedicated land acquisition funding, which essentially that excludes state parks and Wildlife Resource Commission, who would be taking property directly into their management and really should be, set up to immediately receive and manage that property. But the purpose of these funds is for other groups. If you have property that needs to be secured from trespass or some very short-term, almost a very urgent management issue on it, there will be a small amount of funds available. Examples include putting up a gate to restrict the access to that area and alleviate kind of immediate threats to conservation values. If there's an area where people are poaching your endangered plants on the interior part, there's a way to kind of block that off, or some very small minor repairs to some of the conservation resources. The expenses we're looking for and what is eligible for this funding source, you do need to identify them in the budget at the time of your application, so that they can be approved by the Board of Trustees. So this will be very difficult if at the end of the project you come up and say, oh, we forgot we need a gate. I'm not going to be able to approve that for you at the end of the project. So think about this up front. It does need to be, the expense for this needs to be during the contract period. So again, not any expenses that can extend once you have purchased the property, closed out your grant, and then have a management need. So it's going to have to be anticipated from the start of the project. And then, of course, like everything else, you're going to need to have it an invoice or a signed form for any in-kind work, but you're going to have to substantiate the cost. And do keep in mind there are other policies with clean water that this will not replace. So, for example, Clean Water has, for a long time, had a policy to not pay for removing debris or structures. I know that's common on properties, and that is an expense, but this is not meant to help with that issue. So just any questions about what is or isn't eligible, you've got Justin, Damon, and me that you can call and ask throughout this process. Start with your field reps when they're visiting with you, and as you're out on properties, anything here that you may be requesting property management, they will want to see out on the site visits. So as I've been talking about this, I've said a couple of times this is a small expense. These are not a lot of funds. This is $5,000 allowance, either from Clean Water or that you can use as a match. And again, I think for right now, start thinking about those properties where a land trust may be purchasing the property, going to hold it for a few years before state parks will take it, and you want to make sure that the trespass, the ATV, the dumping is stopped by securing the access to the property. Okay. Does anyone have questions on this? Okay.
This is a new budget line item in the application process.
We just had the question in the room if this is a new line item on the budget. The line item has been on the budget page, but has only been available to local governments. So if you haven't noticed it, it's probably because you weren't eligible for it and didn't pay attention to it.
Next slide's going to say Q&A. Yep.
Oh.
That's all right.
Oh, I'm running away.
You already said, you already asked questions. Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to throw one in real quick before you miss. So in the past, Clean Water has not paid for, they're not aware of, its boundary signs that we're required to post. Would we put that in that line item?
Actually, would love to chime in on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you don't mind. I'll stand over here so folks can hear me. So somebody from the back of the room asked about clean water boundary signs. I would actually love for you to pay for boundary signs and boundary marking in the survey part of the budget, because I would love to have the properties well marked, well signed. We would love to pay for it, but see if you can get it in the survey part, and perhaps even see what your survey will do in terms of you're walking the line anyway, bring a scraper and some paint and some nails and put them up then. So that would be a good place for that, those expenses.
Really good question, though. I'd say any more questions on the acquisition side more generally? Should have made it clear. I'll take those questions.
This may be done with the application, but you had that March to June review period.
Mm-hmm.
You will have at the end of June or some date a chance to make certain changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The question is, in the review period, March to June, will we have a date in there for you all to make a few updates to the information? And the answer is yes. We're not putting that out in all of our timelines because we are working internally to make sure that we know where we need that in the process. But Damon and Justin will keep you informed as we go through the review cycle when that update, that final deadline will be. And as last year, that is a date to update us on landowner status or match status. This is not a date in which you finally have gotten your project figured out and you change a lot of information for us. These are just a very specific updates that then, after that point, we use and the score will not change. Okay.
All right, when you say the score will not change, yeah, I'm going to wait till you sit down.
Okay.
If you get match in hand, doesn't that change your score if you actually get match in hand?
Up to a certain date. And there's a point at which we have to just stop changing information, because there's a lot of preparation for getting all the files together and to the trustees, and we do not want to have to send out versions to the trustees. So I don't mean to be difficult by not announcing that date. We'll let you know in advance of it. But we just get to a certain point where we have to say information is frozen. What if I sit down on this stool? Will that prompt more?
Trying to come up with something else.
No, okay.
Thanks, Nancy. Hello, good afternoon. I'm Steve Bevington, and I administer the restoration program for the Clean Water Management Trust Fund. And if other general questions come up about restoration, I'm happy to answer them. And of course, Nancy will step back up as other questions come up about acquisition. The restoration program really has three major parts. Restoration itself, generally it's stream restoration, but other restoration of degraded lands that contributes to water quality. Innovative stormwater for progress towards understanding better solutions to stormwater issues across the state. And the planning program is also considered restoration at this point. So at the end, again, I'll consider any general questions you have about that. Anything specific, as Will has mentioned before, Nancy as well. Obviously, the field reps are your place to go to discuss project-specific questions. And we have a lot of time set aside amongst staff to address those, not really for today's discussion, but in the future. There are four, I think, somewhat, potentially some people, important changes to the restoration program from previous years. They've been up on the screen for a while, so perhaps many people in the audience have already read them. I'm going to go through them quickly here and then go back to any general questions you have. Really, the changes are that we have allowing now existing condition surveys, if they're completed with the application, actually qualify for points. It's a simple way to get points that I'll go through in a minute. Not many, it's only a few, but it's something that was not available in the past. The board has asked for any contingency funds towards construction to be matched before we would consider them either. We'd fund them up to 100% of those contingency funds. That's no longer true. Must be matched at least 50%. Educational signage, in some cases, may now be considered a match. That was not considered last year as eligible match area in this restoration program. And also long-term monitoring project that extends beyond the contract period, it could actually be considered for match too under certain conditions. So let me run through those quickly if I can get the mouse going. So the first one I just want to point out and essentially put the mouse over it. Essentially the first line item, I apologize for all this text, but the first one that you briefly saw a mouse for, it's essentially a condition last year to get 3 points from the out of 100 for a restoration project. You had to have your plans and specs essentially completed and submitted and signed off to get 3 points, and almost as far, the design complete to get 3 points. And the board has changed that condition, so now that's still true to get your full 3 points, but you're also eligible to get partial points for an existing condition survey, which shows the project is still ready, which is the intended part of these 3 points, but also allow staff to further evaluate a restoration program. And for those who aren't familiar, it's really just a survey of the existing stream or resource that's damaged in survey language so that people can describe its width and depth and extent, have a lot of information, but not all the detailed work info plans that we're going to do. And there's some details in there you can see in this guidance that I'll skip at this point, but it's a resource if people have opportunity to take advantage of it. The second change for this year, as I mentioned before, it's a pretty straightforward one. Contingency funds in construction often can be 5% of the construction budget or something like that. We're hoping to sort of control some costs in those line items by allowing, essentially requiring that applicants have some skin in the game on contingency match. So consider those issues as you move forward. Last year, and in previous years, there were some requests for educational signage to be included in budgets. We did not include those, even as match. And this year, they are eligible for match under several conditions. I've got a couple examples up here, and I know you probably can't see them very well, but really the signs would need to be prominently displayed, provide educational content about the project as implemented, and also mention Clean Water's role in that, and have some relevance to moving an understanding of the project forward in the public sense. And that would be something staff would review, but that certainly could be considered now as a small part of the match towards the project. And the last change for 2018 is that monitoring programs in the past have been proposed that would take 5 or 10 years to complete. And since the contract period was only 2 years, we sort of trimmed those off at the extent to be completed during the contract period. We felt we were sort of penalizing really well-designed monitoring program plans and not allowing agencies to come in. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, for example, it had a 5-year monitoring program with one of our projects. We only considered 2 years of that project to be a match. Well, really, as long as there's a design in place and a well-founded and funded and set up monitoring program, we will consider that and not hold the applicant necessarily required to deliver all of that match during the project period, sort of have it on faith that that will be delivered after the project contract ends. While this slide's up, and this is my last slide really about the 2018 program, I just want to discuss a quick bit of emphasis change for the Innovative Stormwater Program. It isn't a change in any materials really or requirements, but the design part of doing a study to understand how well the project is going to work, we're going to try and take as careful a look as we ever have on that. It's in the guidance materials and the application. So if anyone in the audience or knows of other people who are considering the Innovative Stormwater Project, please be careful of your design of how you're going to monitor it and come up with be able to prove to us that there's some conclusion that you will be able to make from your work. So let's put that up there while we're here. Is there any questions about any of those 4 changes while I'm on this topic? And I'll walk through those kind of quickly.
Yep, I've got one. Does contingency match have to be cash, or can it be in-kind services?
It's a great question that I'm not sure I'm prepared for. I think contingency funds are almost always cash. There are separate line items for observation of construction. So my off-the-cuff interpretation of that, I'll have to take a closer look at it, would be either cash or literally like equipment on site value of actual earth moving equipment or something, but something very related to the actual construction process. So whatever would be acceptable under a construction line item, the contingency match would just be the same nature. So if you could describe, in other words, if the question could satisfy a construction bill with some sort of in-kind effort, that same bit of contingency work could conceivably be considered in that. Most cases, I would imagine it to be cash.
All right, same topic. Is construction contingency required, and can it be excluded from the budget?
Many of the projects we had in the past do not have a contingency line item, so that's really the applicant's determination on the level of risk. Some projects have proceeded just fine without that. We've had projects that have run into some financial difficulties, as many projects do, sort of an uncertain future. Since a lot of the restoration projects we have do not have finished designs in place when they begin, there is some uncertainty. So 2 ways to do that. One, sort of pitch a construction budget you feel confident with that can cover the costs without contingency, or put a contingency line item. If it's not claimed, if there's no request against that money, the match will also not be requested to close out the contract. Any other questions? Any from the room, back of the room, front of the room?
You'll have to sit down to get those questions.
Yeah. Well, if I sit down, I'm sure there'll be a question for Nancy. Maybe try that. All right, well, thank you. I'll sit down at this point, but please stay in touch if you have further questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. So I'll close up here, and then we'll stop recording and maybe go into another section, as I mentioned, where Terry will have a few tips for folks that are current grant admin folks, since we got everybody together and we're all here. But as I said, I would come back to who should you contact? First, your field representatives on anything except GMS-specific questions. I can't get the GMS to work. I'm having trouble with that. That's Gwyn McCullough, who's not here today, but her contact information is on this slide, as well as on our website. But Damon and Justin should really be your first call about all project and grant-related questions for the upcoming cycle. I believe that is the last slide there. Any other questions before we go on to the other section? All right, thank you very much.